Hello everyone, welcome to this session on S3. S3 recently completed 15 years of its life because it was launched in 2006, and the last week Amazon was also celebrating Pi week, which was to celebrate 15 years of S3. So I thought I should do a video which is a deep dive on some of the features of S3. So here we are. The agenda for today's video is to talk about S3 as a service, the basic building blocks, the milestones, some of the major milestones that S3 has achieved in the last 15 years, because there are tons of enhancements that were done to S3, but we would look at some of the milestones. We would go a bit deep into storage classes, what are the different types, when, what should be used. Then we would look at the security best practices and do a bit of hands-on on the AWS Amazon console to see how the security options can be configured. So S3, as I mentioned, is one of the oldest services from Amazon. It was launched back in 2006, and today if we look at the landscape of objects that are there in S3, so there are close to 100 trillion plus objects that are residing in S3. There are 60 plus availability zones and 20 plus regions. There are thousands of customers who are using S3. In fact, S3 is the most widely used service of Amazon because it can be used in multiple use cases as a storage. Let us talk about some very basic concepts in S3. So first of all, S3 is an object oriented store. Whatever gets stored in S3 is actually stored as an object. So the fundamental building block of S3 we can say is objects. Now there are buckets. Buckets are nothing but they are containers in which we are keeping the objects. So in S3 we would create a bucket, and inside the bucket we can create folders, we can put data, but bucket is essentially the container inside which if anything that you put in S3 would reside. Now every object that we put in S3 in a bucket would have a key to identify the object. Now S3 is a region based service, meaning you need to select a region and that your S3 buckets would correspond to that region. So these are the few fundamental things that we need to know when we talk about S3. So S3 is simple storage service. It's an object oriented store with buckets, and inside buckets whatever goes in is treated as an object. Now there is a concept called storage classes. This is important because in S3 there are different variety of storage classes, and in a life cycle of your object, when you put an object in S3, it is important to understand how the storage classes work, because then we can efficiently use the storage classes and keep moving our object to different storage classes and reduce the cost. So let us look at a bit about what storage classes are, but before even diving to storage class, what we will have is we will have a look at different milestones that S3 has achieved in last 15 years. Then we will deep dive into storage classes. So initially when S3 came in, there was only one storage class, which was S3 standard, and that was launched in 2006. Then there was a feature called versioning added in 2010. I have just put in the major ones. I have not put in all the enhancements that were done, because there were tons of enhancements that have been done in last 15 years. And if you look at S3, there are 320 plus microservices that are running in the background for S3 to function. Now versioning came in 2010. Versioning is nothing but when you put an object inside S3 and you enable versioning, if you keep on updating and putting changing the object, it keeps on creating versions. Then Glacier came in 2012, the archiving service. Server side encryption came in 2014. Similarly, in 2015, there was a new storage class introduced called standard infrequent access. So objects were getting moved from standard to infrequent when they were not getting used. You could move them to IA. Similarly, there are many other features that got launched, like VPC endpoint, life cycles rules. Life cycle rule is nothing but moving an object from one storage class to another storage class. Then one more class was introduced called S3 one zone IA. We will look at all these storage classes in a bit in detail. Then intelligent tiering, this concept came in. This is nothing but a service which enables you to look at the data access pattern, and then moves the objects across storage class based on the access pattern. There is no lifecycle rule that needs to be set by us or manually done. Intelligent tiering takes care of that. Then there is Access Analyzer that came in 2019. Access Analyzer will analyze the pattern in which the S3 objects are getting accessed. Then we have Glacier Deep Archive. This is another storage class which is even more cost efficient than the Glacier. Then object locks. Object locks are locks that we can put on the object. We will look at these when we talk about security. Okay, this basically locks the object and the object cannot be deleted. It can be very useful for regulatory requirements, compliance, as well as when you want to ensure that data doesn't get deleted. One very good feature that has come in 2020 is strong consistency. Now whatever object is written into S3 can be read immediately. So it has a strong consistency. S3 is also supported with Outpost. Outpost is when you want to when you have data on premise, you may want to use a service called Outpost, which gives you extension to your existing cloud. And in intelligent tiering, the intelligent tiering was introduced in 18, but in 2020 there were new storage classes that got added to intelligent tiering. So now data can be moved from standard, infrequent, etc. into archive as well using intelligent tiering. Let's talk about storage classes. So there are different storage classes in S3. Initially when S3 service got launched in 2006, there was one storage class which was standard storage class. So anything that you put in S3 by default goes to this storage class. And the speciality of the storage class is that whenever we want the data to be accessed in milliseconds and it is an active frequently accessed data, it should be in the standard storage class. This is the default one. So whenever we put in some object, by default it will go into this storage class. There is a period after which we can transfer this to infrequent and other storage classes. So after 30 days only the data from standard can be transferred to standard IA or any other storage class. So there are retention periods that standard will have 30 days, then in infrequent it will be there for 60 days, then it will go to archive, after 90 days it will go to deep archive. So there are rules like that. That can be either done by intelligent tiering or it can be done by setting life cycle rules. If I have to set life cycle rules, I have to specifically say what is my life cycle rule, or else if I use intelligent tiering, it takes care of moving the data between different storage classes by looking at the access pattern. So the second type of storage class is standard IA, infrequent access. Any data which is infrequently accessed but still we want to have it in milliseconds. When I want to access, I want to have it in milliseconds. That is a candidate for standard infrequent access storage class. Then there is one more storage class for infrequent access, which is known as one zone infrequent access, which means that the data would be stored in a single availability zone. You will get millisecond access, but you will have data in single AZ availability zone, and usually the data which is not that critical or which is recreatable and it is less accessed, that data would go into one zone IA. So standard and standard IA data, whatever you store in these classes, will actually be stored internally by S3 in 3 or more availability zones. But in case of one zone IA, it will be stored only in one availability zone, hence the cost would be much lower compared to the standard and standard IA. The other storage classes are Glacier, Glacier Deep Archive. Now both of these are used for archiving. Glacier, if you want to archive data and access it in minutes and hours, then Glacier should be used. And if you want a even more cost efficient archiving, then from Glacier it should be moved to Glacier Deep Archive, which is like for long term archiving, and the data can be accessed in hours. Let's say 5 to 12 hours is the time that it takes to access the data. Now both of this Glacier and Glacier Deep Archive, in this cases S3 internally stores it into 3 or more availability zones. Only exception is our one zone IA, which stores in one availability zone. Intelligent tiering, as I mentioned, it is meant for it's a service which will detect the changing access patterns of your data, and based on the access pattern it will move the data from one storage class to another. The access is still in milliseconds. Then outpost is when you have data on premise and you want to extend your cloud to on premise. So S3 is supported on outpost as well, and the data is encrypted using server side encryption. We will talk about encryption a bit more in the performance part of it, performance and security. Okay. Now, since we looked at the basics of S3 and the storage classes, now let us look at what are the security best practices. Whenever we store data in S3, what are the things that we should keep in mind in terms of security? So, there are 4 ways in which I can secure my data in S3. These are the 4 or 5 fundamental ways. One is using identity and access management. So, this is a service which helps you to create users, groups, roles, principals and protect your data. So, you can have a user or a role created in IAM. You can assign specific privileges, what is allowed, what is not allowed at the resource level, and that is how security can be implemented for S3 objects or buckets. It can be at both the levels. Then we can have bucket policies that we set at the bucket level, which will apply to all objects in that bucket. Third is the access control list. This is for even more fine grain access, where you want to say that there will be a read access, a write access, or what kind of access do you want to give. That is given by ACLs. Then there can be something called query string authentication, which is like a temporary access given to someone. So, if there is a user and you want to give a temporary access to some resource, you can use query string authentication. And similarly, another way of encrypting data is either using server side or client side encryption, and encrypt the data, and that can be done at both data at rest and data in transit. So, these are 5 fundamental things by which we can put security controls on our data. Now, let us go a bit deeper and see what are the different things or practices that should be followed. For example, one of the very basic thing to do is block all public access. So, I'll show on the S3 console how we can enable this option. In a bit we will do a hands-on to see how we can set these kind of rules on S3 buckets, but this is the most fundamental thing that we should be doing to revoke all public access to your S3 bucket, so that nobody outside of your organization or from the internet can access the bucket. We can also have individual access points created. So, if there is data residing in S3 and I want to give specific access to, let's say, finance data, HR data, IT data, different types of data, I can create multiple access points. Okay. Then another rule of thumb is implement least privilege access. So, we should always give the least access that is absolutely needed for a particular user or a role. We should never give permissions which are like too open, or which gives a lot of flexibility to the user to do whatever they want. So, it should be always the rule of giving least privilege. And the third thing that we have to keep in mind in terms of access is that for delete we should enable multi-factor authentication. So, you would see on Amazon console, if you want to delete an object from the console, it will ask you to type in the word permanently delete and then only allow you to delete the data. But when we are writing applications or building applications, we are actually accessing Amazon through APIs, all the web services through APIs, and it is very important to have certain measures inbuilt, so that there is accidentally also we do not delete the data or do some malicious activity. That is where your IAM, all those ACLs etc. will come into picture. Then encryption. In encryption we can do 2 types of encryption. One is encryption at rest and second is encryption in transit, when the data is in transit. So, in encryption at rest there are multiple types of encryption that we can do. One is the server side encryption with Amazon S3 managed keys. So S3 will manage the key and do the encryption and decryption. So while creating the object, we can select these kind of options. We'll see it on the console how we can select the options, but essentially server side encryption is possible using S3, or there can be a server side encryption where customer master keys are stored in the KMS. KMS is a key management service by AWS, so the keys will be managed and stored in KMS. Then there can be a server side encryption which is by customer provided key. Here the customer is responsible for providing the key to do the encryption and decryption. So, and the last type of encryption is client side encryption, where we are doing the encryption before landing our data into S3. So the server side encryption is not happening, the client is solely responsible for encrypting and giving the data into S3. Similarly, while we are bringing the data into S3 or while the data is in transit, we can use TLS or HTTPS TLS to prevent any potential eavesdropping or manipulation. Both of these types of encryption are necessary to give a 360-degree security to our data. So whatever we spoke about till now was about data security, but there are certain things we can do for data protection. When I say data protection, it means the data which is there, I want to protect it from any accidental overrides, deletes or corruption. So there are three ways to do it. One is object lock, which means that I can lock an object that I have stored in S3, and it will help me in preventing any kind of deletes etc. that I may want to do to the object, or accidentally I may do some delete. So for any regulatory purposes, legal purposes or prevention of deletion, we can use object locks. Versioning can also be enabled. So if we want to use object locks, versioning has to be enabled, then only object lock can be applied. So the object lock can happen in conjunction with versioning, but versioning can be enabled standalone. If I do not want an object lock, I can still have a versioning. Versioning will enable my object to have multiple versions, and I can retrieve any version that I want. Then the third thing is cross region replication. So if I want to protect my data, I can actually replicate my data to different multiple regions. So that's cross region replication. Okay, so till now we looked at the basics of S3 and the security best practices, but let us go into this console now and I'll show you how we actually configure those parameters that I spoke about. So let us go to the search bar, and if I just put S3, it will bring up S3. I click here and go to the S3 console. Okay, now on the left hand side you will see there are different options that S3 gives you, like access point, batch operation, access analyzer. We would not look at all of these, we will have look at these in a separate video. For today we'll just concentrate on the buckets and the different options of security that we can configure. So what I have done is, if you click on bucket, you will see the list of all the buckets that you have. So I have created already one bucket called Shreya test, which is in the region Pacific Mumbai. So it is advisable to select the region which is nearest to you. And then access, if you see, the bucket and objects are not public, that is what I have selected. But let us create one more bucket and see how it is done. So if I click on create bucket, it brings me to this page, and now these names have to be unique across whatever buckets have been created. So if you see this bucket, I am renaming it as Shreya test 1. I can select the region where I want to create this bucket. As I mentioned, this is a region specific service. Okay. Now this option is very important, the one I was talking about of blocking public access for the bucket. Now by default it is checked, and you should always have this option ticked, because it will prevent any access from outside of your organization or from the internet. It has three things that it has blocked: block public access to buckets and objects granted through new access control list, block public access to buckets and objects granted through any access control list, and it also blocks anything which is a new public bucket or access policy that has been defined. Even the cross account access is disabled. All of this access is disabled. Then there is something called bucket versioning. By default it is disabled. So we looked at all these options in our security best practices. So if you want versioning, you should enable this option. For now I am just keeping it disabled. The tags are nothing but you can put tags to your bucket. Okay, tags are just something like a key value pair. If I go to add tag, I can put a key and a value. It's like a metadata for my bucket. Then look at this default encryption. By default the encryption is disabled. This is server side encryption. We looked at client and server both. Now if I click on enable, then it will show me the different types that are possible. So we can either have a server side encryption S3 encryption, or we can have this one. If I select S3 server side encryption using KMS, then it will show me few more options. It will ask me whether my key has to be managed by S3, or it will be chosen from KMS master key, or I want to enter a KMS master key. Okay. Similarly, there is one more option which is called bucket key. Now what happens is, when we use KMS, every time I want to, if I put a get request to get an object from my S3 bucket, it has to contact KMS to get the key and then encrypt or decrypt my object, and this will happen for every request that I put. So if there are 10,000 files I am accessing, it has to put 10,000 requests to KMS to get the key. Instead of that, if I select this option bucket key and enable it, it is recommended, because then it will reduce the cost of KMS by 99%. What it will do is, it will just give you a key at the bucket level. So for all the 10,000 files where you were making 10,000 KMS requests, now you will make a single KMS request. It will give you a bucket key, and then you can decrypt and encrypt. The objects will be decrypted and encrypted. Okay, so that's why this option is recommended. In advanced settings, you have the object lock. We spoke about the object lock block, which is meant for write once and read many times, like a worm model. So here I can enable. It allows the objects in that bucket to be locked. Okay. Now all of these options we can select and then create a bucket. I had already created a bucket here. So let us go back to that buckets. You will see that I had already created this bucket earlier. If I click on this bucket, it will show me. Right now I do not have any object here, but if I upload an object, it will show me all the list of objects here, and you can have multiple actions, whether you want to open the object, you want the total size, copy, move, all of that options are available. And you can also run a query using S3 select on your object. Okay. Similarly, as I mentioned, in the bucket, either you upload objects, like I go and upload here, or I can create folders. If I select the option of upload, what it does is, it shows you add files and add folders. So you can add different folders and upload, or directly upload. It shows you the destination, and what you can do is, for your object that you are applying, you can enable all of these so this, since we had put it at the bucket level, we had disabled everything, it is showing as disabled. If I want to enable bucket versioning, I can click here and enable the bucket versioning. Now this is a very important thing. We looked at the storage classes in detail. This storage class option is coming when I am uploading an object. So while uploading, I can say where do I want to upload, in which storage class do I want to upload my object. So I can select any of the storage class. Okay, but one thing to keep in mind is, if I select standard IA, the object has to remain in IA for 30 days. You cannot move it before that. That is the minimum storage duration. Similarly, if you put in Glacier Deep Archive, the object has to be there for 180 days. Okay, all these are applicable. I can select all these, or by default I can just make it standard. So it is important to understand what each of these storage classes mean, so that you can select the one appropriately. Similarly, there are encryption settings that I can do. I can select an encryption key, or I can just say that I do not want to encrypt my data. Okay. Now these are the ACLs that we spoke about. ACL is access control list. So I can say that the objects, do I have read access, do I have read and write access, all that can be selected. This is the this access is for object owner, or the AWS account from where I created this. this is a public access. For public access, do I want to give read or not, and for authenticated users, do I want to give any access or not. Then there are tags and metadata that you can add. These are optional, and just these key value pairs can be added if you want to add some extra information. Okay, so this was all about how a bucket can be created, how security can be configured, how an object can be uploaded. Similarly, when you go here and come to the bucket, okay, if you go inside this, you will have these tabs. You will have properties, which shows you everything that you had selected while creating this bucket. If you want now, you can go and enable intelligent tiering, which will help you in moving the objects from one class to another. You can also configure AWS CloudTrail events, which will track this whole access pattern of what is happening. Any API level access that you are doing to the object will be tracked here. Okay. So it shows all the properties that are available. It also shows permissions that we have enabled on this bucket. So it shows that we have said buckets and objects are not public, because that we had ticked that block public access, and it shows all of these are blocked, these kind of accesses. If you want to apply a bucket policy which will apply to all objects inside the bucket, you can actually apply from here. Then there are certain metrics that you can see. If you put objects, you will see total bucket size, number of objects, etc. In management, one way was by having intelligent tiering to move objects. Another way can be you can go and add lifecycle rules. So if I say create lifecycle rules, I can give a name and I can put my own lifecycle actions, what I want to do, when do I want to move the objects. Okay, all that rules can be selected from this lifecycle rules. And then these are access points. Like I mentioned, if I want to give specific access to a certain set of data, I can do it from here. So today we looked at S3 as a service, how it is built, the basic building blocks, also a deep dive on the storage classes, and then we looked at all the security best practices that should be kept in mind. And we also went through a walkthrough of all of these security configurations, how we can enable them when we create a bucket or an object. So this summarizes the session for today, and in the upcoming session we will do more deep dives into S3, because S3 is a exhaustive service and we would definitely need many more sessions to cover that in detail with a hands-on. So hope this session gave you a bit of primer on S3 in terms of security and basic building blocks. So see you in the next video. Do not forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much.